see, the darkness, it only came because we let the fathers, the monsters, we let them rule. But now, all we have to do is make a breadsheet.
Grand Rapidians play video games. That's right, Grand Rapidians play video games. You are my call out this week. You heard me, and you know what to do. It's Grand Rapidians play video games out there in Grand Rapids, Michigan, I guess. It's at Grand_video on Twitter. Interesting name there. Not sure what it means. Consider yourself called out, though, on this Breadsheet. By me, Hoss Bossman. Is that my real name? Not particularly, no. Not even figuratively. I am but a nameless man. Make sure you follow at Grand_video, Grand Rapidians play video games. And more importantly, subscribe to their podcast. See, I knew what the name meant the whole freaking time. It was a goof. I've been subscribed to their show for a couple months now, and it is a delightful experience. Just kind of a pure hang. Their fellow Zeitgang, I believe, is how we sort of got connected in the first place. It's a smaller podcast, so definitely go check them out. I'm not really, much of a video game person. I do have a PS4, but I always forget that I have it. It's basically just a glorified Blu-ray player at this point. But I should start streaming, because that seems pretty low effort, and maybe I could use some of my downtime to maybe at least tell people about the podcast and stuff and start recruiting people to this leftist cult. Ginger W is the actual Twitter friend who I saw had a podcast and checked it out, and that's the Grand Rapidians Play Video Games. It's just a hang. But yeah, the Grand Rapidians Play Video Games. Check out their podcast. Support smaller creators, but only insofar as it doesn't impede your ability to listen to Breadsheet and listen to my music and read my tweets and watch my video essays. Hey, in case you missed it, I'm really happy with my two most recent video essays on my YouTube channel, which is Hoss Bossman on YouTube. We're gonna fight Grand Rapidians play video games. People have been asking me. That's what that means when I call you out. It means that we're gonna have a fight. I'm going to try and keep this intro short and sweet because I have part one of an awesome interview with Ben Burgis, Philosophy. Ben Burgis, Logic/philosophy professor or is he a philosophy/logic professor? We'll find out on today's episode of Breadsheet. It is 6:15 a.m. I'm insane. So yeah, going to try and keep this intro short and sweet, because I have part one of an awesome interview with Ben Burgis, who's a logic/philosophy professor at Georgia State University, contributed to Jacobin and other wondrous publications, regular on many leftist YouTube channels and podcasts, author of Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left, and a couple of upcoming books. Go follow him on Twitter right now at Ben Burgis, BenBurgis. That's Burgis, spelling of Burgess, not Burgess. Read his great, often funny, but always very, very smart and insightful takes, and to find out when he publishes new stuff, unless you're driving or something. Don't live dangerously just to appease me. 6:16 a.m. now. The Witching Hour. Oh, and of course, how could I forget? He hosts two podcasts, Dead Pundit Society and Give Them an Argument. You may have noticed that he's a smart marketing man, as he named his book and podcast the same title. I saw that he was on the Katie Halper show recently with a couple other folks, which is cray as hay, because I love her, and I borderline idolize Matt Taibbi. I've been reading him for a very long time, the Rolling Stone writer, and she hosts a show, the Rolling Stone show, Useful Idiots, which is pretty good, with Matt Taibbi, and I just think he's awesome. He's a great writer. I don't always agree with him, but who does agree with anyone always? Since I interviewed Ben Burgis for my show, though, I'm just 2 degrees removed from rapping with Matt Taibbi himself. Isn't that cray? Something that hopefully won't be surprising to most of you is that most of the leftist, socialist people whose worldview is all about like cooperation and fairness and equality and love and peace and compassion have been super receptive to coming on the show. So that's cool, right? I mean, Ben Burgis, he's not a small name. He's, been on some fairly large shows, definitely much, much, much larger ones than this one. And he's been on the Majority Report and some other stuff. Michael Brooks' show, he was a regular on that, and probably has shown up on there more since Michael Brooks' tragic passing. That show is still going, by the way, and his sister and his two producers, Matt Leck and David Griscom, have been still running the show, the Michael Brooks Show. I don't know how much longer they'll do that, or if they're kind of transitioning to doing their own thing, but it's been pretty nice watching it. So yeah, go check that out. You can still watch the Michael Brooks Show. I mean, obviously he's not there anymore, and that sucks, but keeping the spirit alive. So we were a little late getting started on this interview, so Professor Burgis was kind enough to come back and finish answering the questions I'd wanted so badly to ask him. So that'll be a part 2 coming up real soon. I'm going to post that before the next mini-sode, which I think I'll do for all future 2-part interviews. So I'm not going to release mini-sodes in between 2-part interviews. I'll just squeeze those out. You'll hear me mention something during this amazing episode of Breadsheet about these United Snakes viewers and say, now just what in the heck is going on here? And well, I'll tell you just what is going on here. I'm launching a new YouTube channel soon. Like as soon as I finish my next political video essay. I know the Quibi video I dropped recently, it's not really political, but like I said in the last episode, I wanted it to be a light topic, so I'm working on one right now. It's kind of more of a critical thinking thing, and I have a couple other scripts in the works, but I wanted to, that was kind of a test run, the Quibi video, and I'm going to launch this new YouTube channel, and it's going to be all political stuff, and I've got somebody, a great Zeitgang listener, did some artwork for that, and I'm very appreciative. And I know it's been a while since you did that, Sorry Hat. There's a free call out, free plug for you, Sorry Hat, great artist, and also just like fun follow on Twitter. Go follow Sorry Hat. I'm also going to release any Zoom or in-person interviews I do on that channel as bonus material. If you want to help that launch be a biggin', and I hope you do, please go to my classic YouTube channel. That's just called Hoss Bossman, and subscribe/click that little bell thingy so you know when I post new videos. You'll be notified when I post the announcement, which I'll do like right as I launch These United Snakes, the new channel. Nobody steal that name, These United Snakes. Now that I've said that, somebody's probably going to do it, but whatever. It's a pretty good name, right? It sounds like a good punk band. Maybe I should go ahead and register it now, and that'll get me off my butt. I really think y'all are going to like this interview. Per usual, I was awkward, which I would say is kind of embarrassing, but who cares? I think it'll be fun for the listeners. So Mr. Burgis was a delight. He really is, just seems like a great dude. I wanted to dig into some of his personal experiences and how they've informed his politics, as I like to do with interviewees. I used to write for Flagpole magazine in Athens, and the main thing I did was I wrote features, usually about comedians, and that's what I always kind of like to try to dig into, is like their background. And I mean, it's not that I'm like breaking any new ground there, but the thing, I see a lot on these leftist podcasts and YouTube channels, leftist professors and thinkers and whatnot, they don't really talk about their personal lives that much, and how that informed their politics, because, if you can relate to somebody's story in some way, it can, help spread things around. And now I'm looking at this outline and thinking I should save what I was about to say for part 2 of this interview when I intro it in a few days here. Before this weekend, I will have that interview up. And so but I think it's more relevant. We kind of get more into the topic that I'm looking at here next week, so I'll save that for next week's intro. In short, Ben has been talking about quote-unquote cancel culture and whatnot a lot recently, how it's something we on the left should be concerned about and all that stuff. He has a pretty smart, nuanced take on this, and he actually just recently posted the cover of his next book, Canceling Comedians While the World Burns, a critique of the contemporary left, to be released by Zero Books in 2021. This isn't Hoss Recommends, but you should check out Zero Books' YouTube channel. It's great. In doing so, you're helping support an independent publisher that publishes leftist authors, which is, of course, great. Buy books from them, too. Something I'll mention here and in the next episode is that I want to interview Raphael Warnock, who's running for Senate, if he'll let me. That was, that's kind of the cliff notes of what I wanted to talk about here, was how like compassion and love and religion aren't all bad or something. I don't know. It was kind of jumbled anyway, so maybe it's better that I gather my thoughts. Till the next episode. Breadsheet. But yeah, Raphael Warnock, he's running for Senate, and he's good and progressive, and he's the preacher at Martin Luther King's church, Ebenezer Baptist in Atlanta, which, if you know anything about them, and which shouldn't be surprising, they do tons of great progressive work for the community. MLK was a great leftist thinker, and, this preacher, Raphael Warnock, he is running for Georgia Senate right now. Really holding out hope for him. And even though this is a very, very small show, would love to, that's something I'd like to do with having any kind of platform at all, is that's maybe one itty bitty teeny tiny way that I can affect change of some kind. So yeah, I want to talk to Raphael Warnock and other people who might see progressive, humane policies as a moral issue, and might also think that charity, patience, forgiveness might not just be the right things to be, like good virtues, but also good strategy for the left. Okay, also, I want to say a quick RIP to Chadwick Boseman. I'd already done one RIP on this series so far, the aforementioned Michael Brooks. That was a very unexpected passing. This was also very unexpected. They were pretty close in age, too. And just, a big bummer. I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but I just wanted to say a quick RIP to him, and of course everybody was talking about that over the weekend, and his real last name, I'm just realizing, is pretty similar to my fake last name. Anyway, I know how much Black Panther meant to people of all ages and skin tones, but as a lifelong fan of the superhero genre, I especially understand why Black Panther and Mr. Boseman's portrayal are so important for younger people of color and the people in their lives who love them. And I think you should watch, okay, let's make this a real quick episode of Us Recommends, why don't we? Okay, I have watched a couple of very sweet videos of Chadwick Boseman today. His passing was announced the day before yesterday as I record this. First, and this will likely be the only time I ever recommend anyone ever watch Jimmy Fallon, but there's a video called Chadwick Boseman Surprises Black Panther Fans While They Thank Him that was done on Fallon, and it's genuinely heartwarming and great and sweet. Also, a video resurfaced of him talking about kids battling cancer whom he was corresponding with, and he can't hold it together, and talking about how they just wanted to see the movie, and it's just really a Black Panther movie, and it's just very sweet, and, it seems like a simple thing, but like I said, I know how much that movie meant to a lot of people, especially people of color. And when I went to the theater, I think I tweeted about this the other day when I heard about his passing. When I went to the theater to see Avengers Endgame, I went by myself because my girlfriend, I have a girlfriend, I promise she's not fake. She's in law school, so at the time when that came out, or she's not in law school now, actually, she's graduated. She's studying for the bar now, but so she's studying constantly, but she's not on like a schedule in the same way that she was when she was in law school. But so she had to stay home because she had like a final coming up or something, and yeah, because it was May, so that makes sense. But when I went and saw Avengers Endgame by myself, I just happened to be sitting amongst like 5 to 7 10-year-old black boys. I don't know why I said I just happened to be sitting amongst 5 to 7 black boys. I guess I didn't want to give off the didn't want to make it seem like I intentionally went and sat with a bunch of black kids for some reason. Like, oh, I wonder how they'll react to Black Panther coming out. There happened to be a group of kids around me, and most of them seemed to be black boys around the age of 10. And they were so excited when, spoiler alert, by the way, for Endgame. I know, it's stupid. I have a video about a really stupid, basically fake review of Avengers Endgame on my YouTube channel. Check it out. So yeah, when I saw Avengers Endgame, toward the end, I guess like 45 minutes from the end, right before the big massive battle, when everybody starts walking out of the little portals and you see Black Panther walk out. Just how excited those kids got around me was worth the price of admission alone. And so, and I understand that, like, you know, something that we in the dominant group in this country sort of can very easily take for granted, that, you know, we are represented all the time. And even if it's something as silly and frivolous or whatever as like a kids or family Disney superhero movie about people with magical space powers and stuff, like, it still means a lot, especially to a kid, you know. And I think watching a couple of those clips of Chadwick Boseman, he really kind of actually touches on what I'm saying much better than I ever could. So this video of him talking about kids battling cancer, whom he was corresponding with, that is really good. It's just a really beautiful human moment, made all the more poignant by the fact that he was privately battling cancer himself at the time. 43 years old, but he impacted so many lives and will be sorely missed by millions. Very few people can say that. His last tweet encouraged his followers to vote for Biden, and although I'm not a Biden fan, I am voting for him come November, and you should too. But keep threatening not to so we can try and push the Dems further left. Anyhow, rest in power, Chadwick. You were a king and surely remain one as you unite with the cosmos that originally brought you here. Thank you for brightening the lives of the young black kids sitting around me in the theater when I saw
Avengers Endgame.
On a lighter, well, not a lighter note at all, super heavy note, been sharing and recommending a video essay from the amazing 3 Arrows channel called How Societies Turn Cruel. It really freaked me out, made me super sad, but it is really fascinating. Really shows how possible fascism is in our society today. It's by a German guy. Seems like he's maybe in his mid-20s-ish. And I find that really interesting what Germans' perspectives are of various ages on World War II, Nazis, fascism, stuff like that. And he's a leftist German writing today, you know, from this perspective, and it seems like they have pretty good education about that topic over there for obvious reasons. Music. Listen to Slayer. They rule. Been on a thrash metal kick lately. Slayer's my favorite thrash metal band, so go check that out. They're super, you know, satanic and fun. Also, go to bit.ly/callhoss to leave a voice message, and I'll probably play it on the show, as long as it isn't racist. And that's going to end this mini episode within an episode of Hoss Recommends. Follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Hoss_Bossman. Check out my YouTube channel by searching for Hoss Bossman or going to hossbossman.wordpress. Oh, wait, no. I should scoot this up top. Okay. I have secured the domain hoss.fun. Go to hoss.fun for all your Hoss Bossman or Breadsheet or These United Snakes, which is a new thing I'm going to be doing. All of those, all of your needs related to those things. Hoss.fun. Isn't that awesome? Hell yeah. Okay. So, I prefer that to hossbossman.com. Hoss.fun. That's cool. I might even just change my name to Hoss Fun. Support me at patreon.com/HossBossman, all one word. Oh, and I almost forgot my old band, the K-Max, the K-MACKS. Our 2010 album, Tobacco and Firearms, is back on iTunes and Apple Music and Spotify and a bunch of other streaming places just in time for the album's 10-year anniversary, which is absolutely insane, as you might imagine. You can listen or download there or go to thekmax.bandcamp.com to buy the record and help support us. I can't believe it has been 10 years. So yeah, that's the Kmax, THEKMACKS.bandcamp.com. Go check that out. And you can access all that stuff actually from Hoss.fun. So just go to Hoss.fun. At one point in this episode, a song starts playing out of nowhere. Don't worry, that's just theme music for a new segment I tossed in there. It concerns insertion. Ooh, it's a band name, Concerning Insertion. Hopefully recording the next interview between now and when part 2 of this one comes out. I'm excited about that guest. I don't want to say who it is because of jinxes and curses and hexes, but suffice it to say he's a co-host on one of like my top 2 or 3 favorite podcasts of all time. Out of all podcasts, he's a co-host on one of my top 2 or 3. I listen to so many podcasts, and it's all the time. Whoa, I'm getting so excited. I'm hitting the mic. Isn't that insane? I mean, that's something that I'm finding is that leftists are just really frickin' nice as hell and just true daddies that will slum it anywhere to, help further the cause a little bit. And that's awesome. Love that about the left. It really is all about just love and togetherness and all that juicy stuff. Hot stuff fun. I should say that way more now. I'll be back at the end of the show to sign off and play you out with one of my songs. I'm going to put No God, I think. That's one of the songs from Tobacco and Firearms, our 2010 EP that you can stream on iTunes and Spotify and download on Bandcamp, and would really appreciate it if you go check that out. And this is probably my favorite song from that EP. I think it just kind of turned out the best. It's got a nice sound to it. I'm not playing it yet, so what am I doing? I'm talking about it. I'll intro it. Maybe it's the magic of audio editing. I'll cut and paste this little section, just scoot it toward the end. I don't even have to record it again. What a delight Ben Burgis is. Really easy to talk to guy. Just can't recommend his stuff enough. I'll be back at the end of the show to sign off and play you out with one of my songs. But until then, enjoy part 1 of this 2-part interview with the man, the myth, the fabled Philosopher King, Ben Burgis. Okay, we are recording like Michael Jordan. So where are you from, and how would you say that that's informed your politics at all?
Yeah, I'm from mid-Michigan. So I grew up in East Lansing, which is where Michigan State is, and I went to college in Grand Rapids and first part of grad school in the hilariously named city of Kalamazoo, Michigan.
Sure.
And yeah, I'm actually very recent transplant to the South, just about a year ago. But I think growing up where I did, I think one way it definitely informed my politics is that there's so much of the culture, the industrial unionism, and in the first in the 30s and 40s and 50s, that Lansing, Michigan, I believe, used to be the car capital of the world, and it was something that gave a lot of people a decent middle class lifestyle that they wouldn't have had otherwise. When I was growing up, it was not uncommon to have unionized auto workers or school teachers, who had the house that they lived in, and they had a little cottage by the lake or whatever up north, and that was totally normal. And it still is to a point, but much less so than it used to be because of the ravages of Reaganism and everything that came after that, right? There's been the sustained, assault on the lifestyle of working people. So I think that was definitely something that I was aware of, growing up and, going into my 20s, and it definitely impacts the way I see politics and, especially the destruction of that, right, later on, that which was even starting to get going when I was a kid, so for example, times that that I've been to places that are not that far away from East Lansing, like Detroit or Flint, and especially for a while in the 90s, these places looked like something out of a post-apocalyptic movie. They play, you go into certain parts of Detroit and there'd just be blocks and blocks that were all boarded up. There'd be a McDonald's and they'd have the bank teller window to, to put in your money, and then they give you your burger, through the glass. Jesus. And, and that's really so I think, I don't know that any of that is why necessarily I became a leftist, or, like I said, there's some family stuff that's relevant there. But it certainly colored the way that I see a lot of this, because I think it's an area of the country where you really have a front row seat to a lot of that deindustrialization, destruction of unions, and the human consequences of those things.
Okay, yeah, kind of probably like a a more advanced level of like say something like Michael Moore that's obviously like from that same region, something that's obviously informed his politics to a great degree, and from the way he talks about it, it sounds like it's just kind of gotten progressively worse. He's obviously a lot older than you or I, but and so would you say that by the time you were a coherent, cognizant human being, that it was that it had already kind of started to take a dive?
Yeah, by the time I was a coherent, cognizant human being, it had gotten pretty rough, right? Like in some ways, there are parts of Detroit that have maybe gotten a little bit better from like the nadir of like how bad it was. But I mean, this is definitely grading on a curve, right?
Right.
It's overall it's pretty awful, both in absolute terms and compared to where it was a few decades ago.
Yeah, I just noticed that you have a Glenn Beck book behind you, but maybe we can save that for if we have some extra time to talk about just researching the enemy, maybe.
Yeah, actually, Joe, I will say real quick, the
Sure.
Glenn Beck book. So that was a gimmicky thing I did on my Patreon. I said if I got up to 100 people, the joke was that people do all these ridiculous like food bucket challenges and stuff. It's like, all right, I'll do the equivalent of like eating a bowl of spiders, and I'll read Glenn Beck's book about socialism. So there's actually a review of that book. Put it to good use. There's a review of it, co-written by me and Nathan Robinson, in the next print issue of Current Affairs.
Oh, excellent. Cool. I got a scoop on that then. I'd definitely be interested to read that because yeah, I've never quite had I was working at a like book warehouse and I came across one of his fiction books and kind of thumbed through it and I couldn't really handle it.
Yeah, I can't even imagine what that would be like.
Okay. Anyhow, let's see. So I guess are you from like a working class background? Like were your parents factory workers, or what kind of work did they do?
Well, my dad was, briefly at one point, right? Like, yeah, he worked at a motor wheel plant in Lansing a long time ago, right? I don't think that factory is even there anymore, but that's not the job that he had, when I was growing up or anything. He moved up in the world. He was a state employee in Lansing at the Department of Information Technology, and so I mean, I think in the sense you mean, probably no, right? I think that like in the strict sense, that neither of my parents, own the means of production,
Right.
the working class, but like the relatively better educated, they're better paid, segment of it, right? Like when my mom retired, she was a community college math teacher.
Okay, excellent. Yeah, so yeah, that would be like forgive me for my ignorance about like academic Marxism and stuff, but that would be like in Marxism there's really only like two classes, right? There's the people who
Yeah,
do and don't own them.
right.
Um
That, yeah, like you have like there's a sort of concept of like there's like the petty bourgeoisie, which is a $5 word for the middle class, who are people who like own like really small businesses or kind of self-employed or whatever. But yeah, pretty much.
okay, and so yeah, now the family question. Did you grow up in a household with like strong political leanings in any direction?
Yeah, actually related to some of what I was talking about earlier, I could actually very distinctly remember the first political conversation I ever had, which is when I was 4 years old. And I remember like waddling downstairs. It would have been November because it was the morning after the election in 1984. And even at 4 years old, I knew that there had been something called an election, and I must have understood that somebody won and somebody lost. Because what I remember is going downstairs to the kitchen and asking my dad who won, and he just had this grimace of pure disgust and sadness on his face. Of Reagan. Uh, so so yeah, I mean, my parents were were like late 60s, early 70s leftists, although that probably makes me sound like much more of a red diaper baby than I was. I think that the more accurate thing to say is that it was kind of half and half between the experience of having that background and the experience of having parents who were, in some ways more of, like normie kind of liberals, that I was like rebelling against their politics to a certain extent, right? He was a little bit of each, that so, I they came out of that political background and were still sympathetic to it. Um, you know, but I also think it's easy to forget now just how much back in like the 80s and 90s, like the left basically didn't exist, right? Like it was like there were like people who had like study groups, and there were obviously there have always been far left sectarian organizations, and like anarchist collectives with like three people in them or whatever, but basically the left didn't exist for the longest time, right? Which meant that like either you were a bit of a larper, right? That like in a sort of weird hobbyist way, right? You were playing at like being part of this movement that basically didn't exist, or you were basically just a liberal, right? So I think that affected different people in different ways, and there are even some of those political arguments that I can remember that like now, um, ironically, as somebody who does a lot of public stuff, promoting socialism, like I'm more sympathetic maybe to my parents' side of it, right? Because I think there's maybe some pragmatic, stuff there that I wasn't particularly factoring as a teenager.
Mm-hmm.
But there were a lot of like, I don't know, fuck the Democrats, I'm voting for Nader, like,
Right.
like sort of conversations, back then also.
Yeah, and also, I mean, I would imagine like when your parents were coming up, that just identifying as being on the left was a different thing than it was by the time you were becoming politically aware, right? Like the Overton window had kind of shifted. Like basically that, I guess probably used to mean for a lot of people just like I'm pro-union. I guess like the racial stuff also kind of complicates that too, but
Yeah, I mean, like, I think that back in the day, right? They were, they were real leftists, and I don't want to like speak for them and how they would frame, this stuff, right?
mm,
Like they're also not like just weird obsessives like we are who think about all
uh,
this stuff all the time. So,
yeah.
but like, yeah, I mean, I think certainly different eras, maybe they're slightly different issues, and and sometimes people, um what you sort of, the political program maybe that you prefer to have isn't always the one that really has anything to do with how you feel about things day to day, right? Which is not like, which is not a way of calling anybody like a sellout or anything. I mean, it's like, I mean, it's a very smart 19th century German guy said, men make their own history, but not under conditions their own choosing.
Hello, Breadsheet listeners and/or these United Snakes viewers, coming at you from my closet for one reason. I just like being in here, and secondly, I just want to come in real quick with a little insertion time. Just want to insert a little something into your body. Professor Burgess cut out a little bit there, so I'm just going to insert this full Karl Marx quote that he was referencing. I think in the interview during the time I acted like I already knew this quote, but I didn't. And then looking it up, it's like, okay, this is, I don't know how famous of a quote it is, but it's not like from one of his major works. And by that I mean it's not from the Communist Manifesto or Das Kapital, goddamn German. The full quote by Monsieur Marx is, "Men make their own history, but they do not make it as they please. They do not make it under self-selected circumstances, but under circumstances existing already, given and transmitted from the past. The tradition of all dead generations weighs like a nightmare on the brains of the living. And just as they seem to be occupied with revolutionizing themselves and things, creating something that did not exist before, precisely in such epochs of revolutionary crisis, they anxiously conjure up the spirits of the past to their service, borrowing from them names, battle slogans, and costumes in order to present this new scene in world history in time-honored disguise and borrowed language." So there's that quote. Now, let's get back to the interview with Ben Burgis.
Would you, I guess that kind of does segue into the next one, which is like, can you recall anything that, and specifically besides maybe that early conversation with your dad that radicalized you? I don't think maybe probably wouldn't call yourself a radical at age 4, but
Oh, no,
for me, like I mentioned, it was like really getting into punk music. And you said, the thing about there not really being a left in the 80s and 90s, and that's basically, and growing up in the mostly late 90s, early 2000s, when I was becoming politically aware, there was the Bush era, which
yeah,
definitely reaction against that. And also just being super into punk music, which was a lot of it, especially looking back now, very prosaic, like wasn't super intellectual, except maybe a couple of bands that I still love. So, any specific examples come to mind of things that quote unquote radicalized you?
yeah. I mean, I guess really it's a series of things, but since, as you say, I mean, it's not like I was a radical at age 4, right?
Yeah.
Like I guess I knew that whoever Reagan was, my dad really didn't like it, but um, but no, I mean, I think that the first time really in my life where I had um, an intense political reaction to anything was, well, actually older than 4, but still definitely in the little kid range. That was the first Gulf War. Um, that I think that because there was this like pretty extreme level, like really to an extent that in a way is kind of hard to imagine now, right? Of like raw, of like just this like just pervasive, jingoistic celebration of that everywhere, right? And like, and like I had, just enough, left politics around me to have a different perspective on that. And so I was like really like, um, really just intensely kind of disgusted and horrified that we were killing all these people in Iraq and everybody was so happy about it. And and then and then and that was probably in some ways the beginning of like being more aware of this stuff, as far as being more active, right? I think that actually that would be 13 years later with the second Iraq War. That was when I was really like doing things like I actually graduated from undergrad a semester late because um, I failed what should have been a nothing class because I was spending all of my time going to protests and organizing protests and and all that stuff, right? Uh, they had to, I mean, I'd already gotten into a graduate program and they very nicely held it for me for a semester so I could retake this stupid class, uh, but yeah, that was probably kind of the high watermark of like activism. And then, then there were, there was definitely a lot of years after that where I think my political involvement like was really pretty limited to like I'd like send a little bit of money to the ACLU. I'd read Glenn Greenwald columns and argue with them, argue about them with my liberal grad school friends at the bar,
Hmm.
and that was kind of it, right? Like the sort of um, the level of identification I've had with socialist politics in the last few years. This is like the least distinctive answer I could possibly give. It's a very familiar one, but really goes back to the 2016 Bernie campaign and the aftermath of that.
Awesome. Yeah, that's really where my I got like kind of reignited there. Obama was the first president I was ever able to vote for. And at the time, and I think I was 19,
Sure.
um, it was like, I remember crying on election night. I was so happy. And, I really didn't know a lot about like, at that point, I guess I just, I was a lot more like so many people, a lot more hopeful about. Then by 2012, I was like, I was kind of hoping that Mitt Romney would win secretly so that people would actually start getting like pissed off, like liberals would start getting pissed off about like drone strikes again and whatnot. But
Yeah,
anyway,
no, yeah, 2008. I think even like knowing better, right? Like even as somebody who doesn't have the excuse of being 19, who was already reading some of those Glenn Greenwald columns, etc. Right, like I had like a little bit of that enthusiasm about it because it was like so infectious, that it was hard not to. And then I definitely feel that like by by 2012, like I don't know that I'm sincerely hoping that Romney would win, but I totally get that like that like that's just how demoralized like I didn't even expect anything of Obama, but it still seemed like a really good thing that that after the Bush years that the country had put in a black nominee who was at least kind of gesturing at some of the rhetoric of peace movement and other things. And so it did again. I mean, I do remember feeling a little bit of that, at the time, certainly on election night, you know, but yeah, like by if you cared, like if you were like paying attention to this stuff and you cared about this all that like elite stuff, a little bit, it was hard not to get super demoralized by 2012. And it's like a useful thing to remember that also makes us weird because like even most people who were open to a better political position weren't feeling that at all. But that makes us weird because even in 2016, right, like again, even people who were open to a better path politically, there were a legion of cars that had Bernie stickers on them in 2016 when they still hadn't taken off the 2008 Obama sticker, or
Sure,
2000,
yeah.
depending on how old the car was, So,
Yeah.
so again, I mean, I think that says something because I think that now it's different, right? Like as demoralizing as the last year has been in many ways, right? That I think now there's like a more widespread differentiation between like mainstream Democratic Party liberalism and something to the left of that. And so, I mean, I don't think like, I think that we're going to have a lot, like even if Biden wins, which for a variety of reasons, as much of a scumbag as he is, I hope he does, but even if he does, right, and I think we're going to be in a situation where many fewer people will have, anything like those kinds of illusions.
Sure. Yeah. And I mean, hopefully that's one good thing that will come out of Trump is just sort of people, at least a good portion of the population, witnessing like just how bad not paying attention to politics can be. And, hopefully that will change a little bit. Okay, cool. So the next thing, we just have a few minutes left here. So part of this is kind of like trying to get some insight from somebody who's kind of more experienced with the left and especially the academic side of it. As I sort of go out on this endeavor, trying to help educate people about some of the basics and have a dialogue with some people who are just getting interested in leftism and socialism and whatnot. So basically, I broke it down to 4 categories, which I'll explain a little bit more in an intro to this. But I've got the woke / SJW folks who, God love them, the domestic economics focus sort of New Deal types, socialist, communist, even anarchists, which is kind of where I would put myself. Bernie Bros, so to speak. Obviously, all these have a lot of overlap. And
Sure.
the more anti-imperialist, the main person I follow who is more of that ilk would be, well, of course, Glenn Greenwald, and like Abby Martin, somebody I've been following for a long time who's more in that zone. And yeah, so basically my question was, in what ways am I kind of oversimplifying? What are your thoughts on that sort of as a broad introductory like set of 3 classifications?
I think that obviously, as you say, there's tons of overlap. I think, in particular, something that's very good, right, recently that would not have gone without saying not very many years ago, right, is that I think that the second and third categories. Let's put it this way. I don't know if the Venn diagram is quite a circle, but it's very close, right? Which is nice, right? That there's that like because obviously there's lots of room historically for those things to come apart. The administration that that gave us Medicare, also carpet bomb Vietnam, so there's no guarantee at all, right? That you won't get that those things coming apart, even if, like, in some ways, probably the Vietnam War is part of what stalled out, that program, because that's where all the money and attention and energy was going to. That's why you didn't get, like, the next step, according to some people, the Johnson administration, the next thing they were planning to roll out after Medicare was like a kinder care kind of thing, giving health insurance to kids under 18. But sure, like, lots of people have supported one without supporting the other. But I think right now, certainly if you look at Bernie's 2 campaigns for president, he was not perfect on this stuff, but he was way better on foreign policy than I ever thought he would be before he did. Um, and I think there's, like, a pretty widespread understanding that creating a better welfare state at home and raising the standards of working people and rolling back empire abroad, aren't unrelated the way that some people, might have previously thought they were. As far as the relationship between one and the rest of those things, I mean, I think in some ways right now, like, the kind of current state of the culture war, like, that's the $1 million question that I know we've got like 2 minutes and we could easily spend 2 hours on this, but
Right.
but real quick, right? Like, I think actually let me do it like this, right? Like, let me do just a quick plug. So for those who haven't read it, a very short book, you'll read it in an afternoon. It's extremely readable, that I would recommend for its treatment of this exact topic, right? Is the late Michael Brooks's Against the Web, A Cosmopolitan Answer to the New Right. And in there, he does a really nice job of explaining how we can kind of steer between the rock of just not caring about bigotry and oppression and various ways in which various people's rights are denied or partially denied right now because they're being mistreated for being trans, they're being victims of racial bias, whatever. All these things of course do happen, right? And they're important, right? And we should care about them. That, like, the sort of foundation of any kind of worthwhile left politics is before we could even kind of go from, all right, like, liberalism isn't good enough, we need socialism to kind of put economic flesh on the bones of liberal rights. We do need those liberal rights. That is important. So in terms of how to kind of steer between the danger of not giving those things their due and the hard place of the kind of extremely annoying performative wokeness that alienates like 95% of people, from all backgrounds. I think the way that Michael frames it in the book is really useful, right? It talks about like having like a cosmopolitan socialism, by which he means that we have, both that we kind of see that people from all sorts of different backgrounds and cultures and quote unquote races and all those things, right? Have shared material interests, can work together on the basis of that. And also that, okay, we don't want to be like, scolding people about how, I don't know, pick your favorite stupid example, right? If white people eating curry is cultural appropriation or whatever, right? You don't want to do that, right? You also, you also don't want to be like unfairly dismissive of things that should be taken seriously. But there is this kind of middle way where where you want a society where, without sort of micro policing cultural expression, right? That you still have this kind of ideal of this diverse cosmopolitan society where everybody's living together and being kind of influenced by each other's cultural traditions and natural ways and not really worrying that much about what, like what you know, who's in what category, but just sort of like freely, living together and being influenced by each other and taking what's good and discarding what's bad about everybody's traditions.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, no, I mean, I think that actually kind of plays into another direction I wanted to go. Maybe we can get back together, tack another 20 minutes on or something like that, just whenever you're free. And I want to be mindful of your time and also I think you cut out just a little bit. The first part of that before the subtitle is against the web, right?
It's the web. That's right. Yeah.
Okay. And then what was the whole subtitle to that?
A cosmopolitan answer to the new right.
Okay, excellent. And yeah, that was, I remember when Michael Brooks was talking about, he was working on that book and something that I know watching that lecture that has been, obviously popular the past couple weeks. And the fact that he addresses that, who knows how relevant these guys are going to be, but the tactics are still going to be there. They'll always be useful to the right. And that's something that, so don't forget on Dead Pundit Society, your podcast, obviously I'm very sorry for your loss about Michael Brooks. I know you two were really close. But that's something that over the past couple weeks and something that, I'll talk about a little bit more. And when I, do some solo podcasting here about how, just talking about how to continue his legacy. It's been both very poignant and beautiful thing to hear about, but also really useful. Of course, I hate the reason that it's been so much in the conversation lately, but I think that that's something that's super important right now. But yeah, if there's anything else you want to add for now, otherwise I'll see if we can get in touch in the next couple of days and just tack on another 20-30 minutes if that's all right with you.
Absolutely, let's do that.
Cool. Thanks again. We'll talk to you soon.
All right, talk to you.
All right, that is going to do it for today, folks. Again, Ben Burgis, Burgis. He's a Burgess, not a Burgess. Is on Twitter at Ben Burgis, all one word, BenBurgis. Publishes in Jacobin Magazine all the time, has 2 great podcasts, Give Them an Argument and Dead Pundit Society, and a fantastic book about arguing against right-wing and for leftist ideas / policies called Give Them an Argument, Logic for the Left. A little pressed for time. I want to get this out soon. So I'm going to just post another song from Tobacco and Firearms, that 2010 album of my band, the K-Max, that I mentioned. You can now get on Bandcamp, iTunes, Spotify, etc. Again, I'm going to end this episode after I tell you to follow me on Twitter and Instagram at Haas_Bossman. Check out my YouTube channel, Haas Bossman. Buy the album this song is from on Bandcamp at thekmax.bandcamp.com or stream it on Spotify, Apple Music, iTunes, all the things. Haas.fun. Go there, and that's everything you need is right there. Come back in a couple of days for part 2 of the interview with Ben Burgis, where we get into some real juicy topics. And I have a Patreon. That is patreon.com/HaasBossman, all one word, no underscore. May your spirit forever warp the fabric of space-time into a gravity well that attracts only love, peace, and prosperity. This song is called No God by my band, the K-Max. Love.